It's time for another Community Partners interview here on Voices for Ability Radio. All abilities, all the time. Welcome to a Community Partners interview where we explore the organizations, opportunities, and resources that look to make change in our daily lives. I'm your host, Sean Pickard, and you're listening to Voices for Ability Radio. Today I'm joined by Carolyn McDougall, an occupational therapist at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital and lead on the hospital's Transition Strategy Employment Stream. Carolyn, how are you today?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me, Sean.
Oh, thank you for coming out and joining us. Before we get going too far here, could you tell me a little bit about yourself? How did you get to Holland Bloorview and why become an occupational therapist?
Sure. I started working at Holland Bloorview because my mom worked there as a nurse for many years. So after university, it was a place I got my first job. I worked in human resources for a while. I became really fascinated by the things I saw occupational therapists doing to help people, do the things that they want to do and need to do in their daily lives, and in particular about work and why it's so important. So after quite a number of years working, I went back to school in my 30s to become an occupational therapist.
That is a tough road to hoe sometimes when you're going back to school.
I was the oldest person in my class, that's true.
Okay, so we'll just kind of leave that one there then. What are some of the programs and services available to folks at Holland Bloorview? I know there's just so many different things that happen there. Mm-hmm. Can you help me understand all of them?
Sure. So as many listeners may know, Holland Bloorview is a children's hospital with both inpatient rehabilitation and also many outpatient services for young people living at home and their families. There's lots of innovative programming that you wouldn't necessarily associate with a hospital, such as adapted sports programs, music and arts programs, life skills coaching for supporting young people with getting going with some of the things that they want to learn about and do, like taking transit to be able to get together with friends. So in terms of the employment-related programs, Holland Bloorview provides experience opportunities for upwards of 60 teens and young adults annually, some at Holland Bloorview, and then also by working together with GTA area community employers. So last summer we helped 18 young people get connected with paid summer jobs.
That is huge, to help someone get that paid summer job, because quite often that paid summer job will turn into something ongoing.
Or at least it's the starting point of building experiences that that we all need in our lives. So lots of times when people are in school, they're not necessarily looking to continue when school starts up again, but having those experiences during high school and college are certainly very important. If you finish college or university and you haven't had many opportunities to get experiences, it becomes a big barrier in and of itself. Absolutely.
And how does this fit in with the Transition Strategy Employment Stream? How does that go together?
The transition strategy overall is it's a multi-year strategy. Holland Bloorview was very lucky to get a large donation from a number of donors to really help the organization look at what we could be doing to best support children and youth and families with that transition to adulthood. So there's more than one stream or kind of part to it. Another example of one would be, say, looking at supports for navigating between healthcare and social services, and then making connections with agencies that serve adults to make sort of smoother pathways that way. In particular, the employment part, we're looking to sort of ramp up the numbers of young people that we're able to help to get connected with employment, and our work with employers and with communities to kind of make those experience opportunities possible.
And that's huge, to have that experience opportunity in the community. Mm-hmm. To be able to, how do I want to word this, grow that fence around yourself, so to speak, where you've got your neighborhood where you do your thing, just where they feel their stake in the community. They're a part of it. Is that a big part of it as well? Yeah, I think that it's unfortunately true that many young people do face some barriers in getting involved in things that are outside of school and or home, sometimes for physical reasons or others. So to take one example, sometimes even though co-op experiences is something somebody could take in high school, not everyone does, because some people are very focused on their academics, and also especially for young people who perhaps need some physical supports, it can be hard for those to be available outside the school. So there are many ways in which it can be a little challenging to get involved in things in one's community, and work experiences is just one example of that. You mentioned something that really kind of registered in my mind, and that was co-ops, the ability to not have those accommodations outside the classroom that the student has in there. And yet we're still trying to get more accommodations into the workforce. So isn't co-op a better place to start those accommodations?
Sure. I mean, starting early is always great. So we're really in talking with young people and families, really trying to encourage people to think broadly about where can people get experiences that in some senses help prepare them for the paid workforce, and are just part of the typical experiences that we look for in our young lives for like learning about ourselves. So some of them are things, could be volunteering, could be co-ops, could be joining clubs after school to be able to be involved in leadership, can be as basic and boring as chores at home. So all those kinds of experiences really help us to, know our own strengths, and then to be able to present those as well when it's the right time for each person individually to be looking for paid employment.
And that's huge, when each person thinks, I'm ready, or they've reached that stage.
Mm-hmm.
But how do they know they've reached that stage? Can you give me some ideas on what might be some of the signs?
Sure. Some things that come to mind are when we're thinking about summer in particular, one important piece is just availability. So, there's many years where people might have more than one priority. It's not always about getting a job. They might just want to, take a break from school and hang out and have fun with friends, or maybe the family's planning a big trip. So one sense of, I really want to look for a summer job this summer is being like, yes, I'm committed to the fact that I'm probably going to have to go to work every day, and it might not be very fun. That was a big deal for sure for my niece this year. It was one of her first full-time summer jobs, and she had it at a camp, and she was great, went through the whole process and signed up for the job, and then she's like, I'm not going to have any fun. And I think that other thing is just about that sense of like, there's a reason why I really want a job, whether it's the money or I really wanted to be connecting with other people in that way and have a sense that I'm helping and I'm being productive.
So an improved sense of self, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has their own journey. We're all individuals.
Mm-hmm.
We all have our own experiences. But there's different things like stereotypes, stigma, myths and misconceptions.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share some of those with me about some of the work that Holland Bloorview does? What are some of the myths and misconceptions that you come across?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Sadly, we do hear from many people that feel that they are encountering misconceptions and stigma in their search for employment and in employment. I think some of the most common ones that we hear about are, and we also hear employers talking about, because sometimes when we're going out there talking to employers about like summer job opportunities, these are the kinds of questions that come up. So, one is about whether accommodations might cost a lot of money, or whether there might be there might be problems where an individual with a disability might not be as productive as other employees, or might have problems with attendance due to health, or things like that. And I think something that we can be doing is collectively sort of busting some of those myths and educating. There's a couple great resources we can look to. Holland Bloorview, as you mentioned, has been involved in an anti-stigma campaign called Dear Everybody. So it's at deareverybody.ca. And there's a great employment-focused resource called the Discoverability Network. So that's discoverability.network. So both employers and anyone working in organizations, but also really encourage youth and families to be checking some of these things out so that we can, all be kind of myth-busting. A couple facts to the myths that I spoke about earlier, that, accommodations often cost nothing. It might be something like deciding to work. That might be something someone does for themselves, like deciding they're going to look for a part-time job as opposed to looking full-time, in order to be able to, say, fit in some health appointments if they need them, or, to manage something like, fatigue, working a whole day. So many accommodations cost nothing, and typically they cost less than $500 anyways. It's not necessarily as costly as might be thought, and only around 50% of workers use accommodations anyways. So that's one thing that we can be talking about in terms of facts. And then reports on productivity for workers and attendance records. Typically, individuals with disabilities actually are rated much higher by their employers on those kinds of things than their coworkers without disabilities. So that's great to be talking about.
And it's nice to get more of that information out there. I've heard from a number of people recently regarding the positive impact individuals with disabilities have on employment numbers and their retention.
Yeah, that's right. I think I could say to that as well too. There's a great, movement to be talking about what is often described as being like the business case for being a diverse and inclusive employer. And there's a lot of kind of powerful facts and figures that people can educate themselves about that way too. I already mentioned Discoverability Network. Another website people can look at would be the Ontario Disability Employment Network. That's odenetwork.com. And lots of YouTube videos as well too on this. And so, one thing that really impresses me in talking about the business case would be for people to just think about it's around 50% of Canadians are affected by disability, either personally or in terms of friends and family. And it's been shown that consumers are interested in being connected with organizations for products and services that are diverse employers. And so really, that's a really large market segment in terms of the friends and family and individuals with disabilities, and also the people that want to shop there then because of that. And then some of the other benefits that workers with disabilities may bring as well too, such as an innovation mindset because of needing throughout their lives to look at doing things perhaps in a different way. So there's a lot of very, very positive impacts from being a diverse and inclusive employer that we can all share.
I like the fact that you mentioned a different mindset, having to look at things differently. And I think that's something not enough people do these days. Mm-hmm. And we've talked a bit about supports and how much they cost or they may not cost, as an example. What are some of these supports that can be put into place? What are some of the accommodations that an employer may or may not need?
Mm-hmm. So speaking for the employer more specifically?
More for the employer.
Yeah. So I think really being inclusive, so many employers are already doing a great job at this, just to upfront recognize. And then if people are at an earlier stage about starting to think about how can we be even more inclusive in our employment, I think education is a great place to start. So I mentioned a couple of those resources that people can connect with online. Just to say them again, Discoverability Network and the Ontario Disability Employment Network. And so then we would really be encouraging people to be thinking carefully about recruitment and their processes, and whether there may be some barriers within those that we may not fully understand until we look carefully at them. So say, for example, taking a thorough look at job requirements and how they're posted to see whether the things that are outlined really are the essential duties of a job, or perhaps some of the things that are listed might be things that could be done differently, and then because sometimes that can really encourage a more diverse pool of candidates to begin with. And then looking at how and where jobs are advertised would be another thing. So employers who really want to sort of advertise for diversity can look at, there's a website called magnet.today. And also to connect with community organizations that do support individual job seekers with disabilities and employers, and look to really get that great match. Those kinds of organizations are called employment support organizations, and there's a listing of them at a website called joininfo.ca. So those are some sort of resources and supports that can help people get started in the journey.
There's a lot of great information there. And you've touched on a couple different things here where I actually feel like I'm double dipping and asking you the same question again. But I think there's a slight variance here, because we just talked about the employers, what they may or may not need to do. But what about from the employee's point of view? They're getting onboarded with a new company, supports are being put in place or being discussed, whatever the case may be. What does that look like? Can you paint me a picture about, like a very broad picture about what it might look like instead of going?
Sure. I think I could have also, for the last question, have mentioned one other great thing that employers can be doing in interviewing is just asking every person that they're interviewing, what do you need to do your best in your job? And that's a great lead into talking about what's true for any person. And then also it's inviting if there may be some specific accommodations, so that in the onboarding process, really communicating clearly, the employer can communicate clearly with all employees about what the process is for requesting accommodations if they would be needed, because recognizing too, not all disabilities might be visible. And so I think that that's a great time for employees to think carefully about if they want to disclose, which again is a personal choice, but to be clear then about what would really help them to do their best job. And if it is something that they think is really quite important, then it may be important to disclose and to work together to try to make a good plan about. And I think another thing that can happen for great onboarding is to really be looking at having a culture that sort of welcomes and celebrates diversity. Something cool that a lot of organizations are doing are starting what they call disability employee resource groups, a group of employees that just decide to come together as a bit of a community. So some of them are specific to disability and look at, hey, what do we want to do in our own workplace to celebrate disability diversity? It could be things like lunch and learns, recognizing important days, and just sharing.
That's a big movement, I believe, now, the one that you were just talking about, in the disability advocacy groups within businesses. So it's nice to see them starting. Now, we've talked a lot about the different things that an employer can do or what an employee might be expecting, but can you share a success story with me? Holland Bloorview's been doing this for a while. Can you tell me about a success story? We don't need names.
Absolutely.
But something that really went well.
Sure. I think I'd like to share a success story that involves also a type of support that may not be that well known, but can be an important one. So it's called job coaching. And so sometimes it's especially important in helping a person who may have a learning or communication difference and their employer. So several of our students that we supported this summer used job coaches. In one particular downtown financial organization, they hired a young student who is super enthusiastic and a really smart guy. He benefits at the start of a job from a fair amount of structure and someone to just sort of help interpret some of the things that might be kind of like hidden rules of the workplace. So as an example, like sort of the hidden rule that if you email someone, they might not necessarily email you right back because perhaps they might be busy. And that can be, kind of, he's so enthusiastic that then he's kind of impatient to get going, and that kind of thing can be a bit hard. So his job coach worked together with him and the employer to sort of set up a really clear daily schedule, perhaps more clear than another employee starting out may have had. And then, to sort of decide how much time to spend on what and what might be a reasonable time for expecting some replies, and maybe to have a scheduled daily check-in with his boss so that he really knew this is when I'm going to get the answers if I haven't had them before. And then the job coach was able to work together so that the coach role faded over time, and then the young man and his employer, really understood each other well and were off to a great start. So after a few weeks, the job coach really wasn't needed, but was available for consultation if some brainstorming needed to happen around other solutions. But that's a role that's available as a support if needed through employment support organizations, and I think is a good one.
And that was on Bay Street, you said?
I didn't say
well,
I don't think,
not on
downtown,
Bay Street,
but you're right.
Financial.
Good guess.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
I'm happy to see that one. If people want to ask for your help, Carolyn, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. So the Holland Bloorview website is a good way. You can go to hollandbloorview.ca and type in youth employment. There's information there. The services at Holland Bloorview are really at the moment mostly for young people who are current and former clients. So I just also, mentioned again, like there's definitely a network of organizations around Ontario that are connected for employment supports. So people can speak with their ODSP caseworker if they want to get a list of employment support organizations. And that's a good way to get started. I think a lot of times people don't necessarily realize that employment supports are a separate part of ODSP or that they're even available.
That's a big thing, I think, is whether a lot of folks really realize they're available or not. So with everything we've talked about so far this morning, Carolyn, what's the one thing everybody needs to know about Holland Bloorview?
Oh, wow. That's a tough question. Well, I think the one thing I'm lately most proud of is the anti-stigma campaign, deareverybody.ca. I think it's something that whatever it is that we're doing in our lives, if we want to support these kinds of conversations, we can be connecting with others and learning about things like stigma and just, and talking about it. It really helps with education and pushing society forward.
I'm going to have to check that out myself.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much for your time, Carolyn. That's all the time we have today. And as a special little treat for this Community Partners interview, I am joined by Samantha and Sageth, and they are also with Holland Bloorview kids, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their experience there. And before we get going, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Samantha, we'll start with you.
So I'm a student at the University of Toronto Scarborough. I'm in my last year, and I'm hoping to graduate in November if all things go as according to plan. But I'm studying English and Media Studies, and I'm trying to kind of explore what is next for me. So that's kind of where I'm thinking about going.
Well, English and Media Studies leaves you a lot of room. You can go a lot of places with that one, can't you?
That is the problem I'm having because it's so broad. So I have to explore where I kind of fit. So.
Okay, and how about you, Sageth? What are you doing these days?
I'm currently in my final year at Ryerson. I'm studying retail management in the Ted Rogers School of Management, and it's been a blast learning a lot about the retail sector and customer experiences.
Customer experiences. Learning about customer experiences. I don't think you'll be so happy after your first week in store, but, we'll see. We'll see what goes on. Now, is there anywhere in particular that you guys are working now that Holland Bloorview has helped you get going with?
Well, for me, it's not current, but all of my work experiences have been kind of through Holland Bloorview and their employment programs. So 2 summers ago, I actually worked as a PR intern at a commercial real estate kind of advisory company. So my responsibilities there were to kind of track how many times they've been mentioned in the media. That was kind of my everyday responsibility. And this past summer, I worked at the Ontario Public Service at one of their branches, when my main responsibility as a project assistant was to help them restructure and kind of come up with a new plan to organize their files. So that was a big
organizing
fun project.
Files. You know what? I used to deal in financial services, so life insurance and investments. And when it comes to files, okay, you got to have those files in top-notch shape, okay? And mine were perfect. At home, I file chronologically by height, okay? So please do better than me, whatever you do.
Yes. It was fun, but it was a whole lot of work because I had to get used to everything in the beginning. So it was a whole lot to learn in a really, really short amount of time, but it was successful, so...
Well, when you think about it, learning how to file is kind of like learning someone else's chaos.
Yes.
You know, you're back to wrangling cats at that point in time.
It was interesting, but
we'll leave it with interesting.
Yeah, we'll leave it with interesting.
So, Jeff, how about you, sir? Tell me about your experiences.
So I got to know Carolyn through the Ready to Work program, and so that helped me kind of get my initial work experience in high school. And they were able to kind of follow up with that a couple years later with the Youth at Work program was initially, and then the Ready to Work program was second. And so that really helped kind of follow up with employment and kind of get more experiences in the workforce. And so one of the places I worked was a bank as a business analyst. And so that really helped me kind of learn about how the workforce is really different from school and how getting work experience is really important. And especially for people with disabilities, it is hard to come by. And so it's really helpful to kind of get work experiences and kind of help bolster that resume.
Well, you had mentioned bank analyst, I believe?
Business analyst.
Business analyst at a bank. My apologies. You must have had some challenges at that workplace. I mean, doing the financial stuff that I did, I had challenges, but, that's me. Now, can you tell me about those challenges? How did you overcome them? What were some of your day-to-day challenges that you faced?
Yeah. So one of the challenges was that we were expected to learn code very fast, and so I had no prior experience at all with coding, and so we were really people there were really friendly, a lot more friendly than I expected, and so they're really helpful, and as well as the accommodations wise as well. I needed accommodation in regard to my seating as well as kind of going up and down stairs, and so they're really helpful and open to helping me because it not only helps them as well as kind of helping me makes me more productive, which kind of helps the business and it helps their bottom line. And so that really kind of helped me helps me see the employer in a different way because I always thought that they really didn't care about their employees as much, but it's really different once you do get into the workforce.
You know what? It makes me happy to hear that things are changing in the workforce for things that way in regards to the accommodations. Far too long they haven't been where they need to be. Now, Samantha, what about you? Some of your workplace challenges, how did you overcome them?
So one of my challenges was very similar to Sajith. Is actually getting acclimated and used to a new physical space. So I had one employer who it actually ended up being a floating workspace, meaning that they didn't have assigned seating. So that would mean I would have to carry my computer around every day to a different workspace. So I tried that for a few days, and I was like, not gonna work for me. So I actually had to have a conversation with my supervisor and was like, so I can do the work itself, but the physical space, I find it a little bit more challenging because I don't want to take the chance in carrying the computer around in danger of me and as well as the equipment. So, and in having that conversation, I kind of reiterated the fact, like I said before, that I can do the work. It's just having the modification to my physical space that that would make it more easier to do the work. So she actually gave me an assigned seat instead of me having to work around getting a new seat every day. So that worked for me.
And it's great when you get that little bit going on. Yep. You've both had that little bit of experience. You've both had the opportunity to kind of grow a little bit as a person. What did you learn about yourself? What are your strengths, your expertise coming from this? Samantha?
I think my strength and expertise is coming from both my school and my work experience is my ability to communicate. Because with advocating for yourself, you kind of have to learn to communicate in a way that is productive. So I would say that one of my strengths is to be able to communicate ideas very clearly. And I'm also a very strong writer in that way because I've been able to hone that skill with school as well.
As an English student.
Yes. Everything you do is writing.
Absolutely. Writing or reading, one of the two. And Sujif, what about you, sir?
I think one of the strengths that I was able to kind of acquire after working was kind of versatility. And I kind of figured that it was really very different from school in terms of you need to be able to do multiple things in the workforce. And a lot of times it's outside of your job description. And so that was really surprising because it's not really kind of black and white in the workforce. There's a lot of areas where you need to be able to kind of stretch yourself and kind of try new different things.
Multi-guessing.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things that I'm trying to improve is my communication skills because I'm usually kind of like really anxious around people and public speaking. And so even in the bank, one of the things that the interns need to do at the end of the term is present in front of the whole company about what they've done. And so that was really nerve-wracking. But I was able to do it, maybe not to the best of my ability, but just kind of improving every year and kind of communicating better as life goes on.
Well, I'd say you're communicating quite well right now, sir.
Thanks.
Tell me about some of your interests and future goals, Sujif. Where do you want to go from here?
So career-wise, I want to become like a project manager, a project coordinator, or in terms of like a process manager because I really like the variety that this brings because it's a different project every day and different processes that you kind of figure out. And it's really a lot of variety I like because it kind of breaks the routine. Personally, I want to kind of fix my communication skills, improve them, as well as kind of be more out there, kind of help more people. And in terms of like even employment-wise, I've seen a lot of people struggle to get jobs, and I kind of really want to help on that end. And so even one of my work experiences was the OPS as a policy advisor through the Access Talent Strategy. And so I was able to see firsthand that the strategy that the government is kind of taking to help people with disabilities, and kind of I want to help make it faster, just as fast as possible to kind of help people with disabilities because everybody does want to be able to have a job and be independent.
Your favorite game, hurry up and wait. And how about you, Samantha?
So in terms of my future, I think with my work experience and with my school, I'm going to be exploring something in communications or PR. Because I feel like that is where my strengths lie. But in terms of employment as well, it's just kind of getting more confidence in terms of getting myself out there and finding the job more independently, because the other all of my work experiences have been through connection. Although I'm thankful, I just kind of want to be able to do it as independently as possible, maybe. So that's kind of where I'm gonna try and strive to work for.
Okay.
But
So let's look at personal successes. If you had to share your own story as a success story, how would you do it, Samantha?
I think in terms of a personal success story, is I would say I have been able to find work and I've been successful in that, and I would share a story in which I was successful, meaning, for example, with my job at the OPS when I was a project assistant, my very last week, all of my project team was like, "You've done a great job. All of the documents, I can find them. I know where things are. They're organized. Thank you very much." So in that way, that would be my success story. But yeah, so for me, it's just knowing that I could get a job and do well in that. That would be a success for me, because not that I've struggled, but I've kind of sometimes second guessed my abilities in terms of that. But
Well, it sounds to me like you are successful, my dear. So it will come to you.
thank you.
And Sujif, yourself, sir, can you tell me a bit about your success story?
I think one of my successes is that kind of changing my mindset. When I initially went to the workforce, I was really nervous, really kind of anxious about what was going to happen and how I was going to deal with failure. And so I know a lot of times over the past couple of work experiences, I would make mistakes during the course of a day. And so I would really feel bad about it and kind of be depressed about it for the whole day. But it's kind of about kind of moving on and kind of moving forward. And so even in the job hunting process, I've been rejected for many, many jobs. And so it's kind of just not being too sad about it, but not doing too high on the highs, too low on the lows. And so it's really helpful kind of knowing that it's just taking as experience, kind of moving on. And so kind of changing the mindset and kind of going forward.
Good to hear. And now I'd like to know from you, sir. What's the one thing everyone needs to know about Holland Bloorview?
I think the one thing that people need to know about Holland Bloorview is that it's more than just a hospital for people with disabilities. It also helps them in multiple facets in terms of employment, recreational, and kind of more society. And kind of really, it's really kind of helping people with disabilities kind of blend in with society and making sure that they don't just stand out, but they're kind of just one of many people.
They're just part of society again. We all are.
Yeah.
And what about you, Samantha? What's the one thing about Holland Bloorview everyone needs to know?
Well, coming from a person who has been associated with Holland Bloorview ever since she was like 5 or 6 years old, I would say, very similar to Sajith, it's just a place for you to be. It's not a hospital. It's a collective. You meet people there and you gain experiences there. It's not just a medical place. It's not a place to be scared of. You're going to be accepted there, and you're going to be able to learn how to succeed in your future and in your life. So, yeah.
Those are some pretty strong words coming from some folks who have had success. So I think folks need to take it to heart. But that's all the time we have today, folks. Thank you very much for tuning in. Sujith, Samantha, thank you very much for joining me. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.